Have you ever gotten a phone call from a nurse 2 states away telling you your mom fell again? And you're standing in the kitchen 1,000 miles from her, trying to make a decision about a person you can't even see. If you're the one everyone calls, even though you don't live anywhere near her, I need you to hear this today. Distance does not mean you love her less, and it definitely doesn't mean you're failing her. Welcome back to From Overwhelmed to Relief, the Senior Caregiving Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon, Senior Care Consultant, Advocate, Certified Dementia Practitioner, and someone who has walked this caregiving path, both personally and professionally. This is a podcast where we break down senior care decisions, talk honestly about dementia and caregiving, and help adult daughters find relief while taking clear, loving action. Because you deserve to get your mom the care she deserves without losing yourself in the process. If you're juggling your own life, work, marriage, kids, and trying to care for a parent with a complex need, if you're exhausted, overwhelmed, and secretly wondering how much longer you can keep doing this, you're in the right place. This is where we speak truth with tenderness, accept the messy realities of caregiving, and remind you that choosing yourself and loving your parent isn't selfish. It's necessary. If you ever felt guilty for not living closer, if you're managing your mom's care by phone, fax, or begging a stranger at the nurse station for information because you can't just drive over and see for yourself, this episode is for you. Here's the problem. Caregiving doesn't require proximity, but long-distance caregivers carry a very specific, very lonely weight. The guilt of not being physically present, layered on top of exhaustion, trying to manage everything from far away. Here's what's happening right now for families managing care across state lines. You just can't pop in to see how mom's really doing. You're relying entirely on a facility staff to tell you the truth, and sometimes they don't. Every decision, a fall, a medication change, a hospitalization, comes to you secondhand, over the phone, and often after the fact. If something feels off, unexplained bruises, missed care, a caregiver who has little too much control over finances, you have no eyes on the ground. And when you finally decide it's time to bring mom closer to you, the logistics feel impossible. Touring communities you've never set foot in, coordinating a discharge from 1,000 miles away, and figuring out Medicaid rules that are different in every state. The result, long-distance daughters, nieces, and sons live in constant, low-grade state of dread, waiting for the phone to ring with news you weren't there to prevent. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Even when you finally decide, okay, it's time to move mom closer to me, you now have somehow evaluated communities you cannot physically walk into. You're looking at a glossy website, a few staged photos, and a sales director on the phone who is understandably trying to fill a bed. How are you supposed to know if this place is actually safe, actually kind, actually the right fit from 2 states away? Here's what I've learned walking with families through this exact thing. Your job was never to be everywhere at once. Your job is to build the right team on the ground and to know when it's time to bring your parent home to you. You don't have to personally supervise every meal, every medication pass, every therapy session. You need 3 things: someone trustworthy, watching day to day, a clear plan for the decision that matters, and a willingness to ask honestly, would she be safer and better loved close to me? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do from afar is start the process of closing that distance. A huge piece of doing that well is not trying to be your own eyes, ears in a city you don't live in. It's bringing in someone who already has trained eyes and ears for you. Let's talk about this, because the piece that trips up long-distance families the most, touring communities. If you live nearby, you can walk the building at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday and come back on a 6 p.m. on a Friday and see the 2 completely different versions of the same place. You can trust your gut when something feels off. You can watch how a caregiver talks to a resident when they think no one important is watching. When you live far away, you don't get to do that. You get 1 flight, maybe 2 days on the ground, and a whirlwind of 5 or 6 hour tours crammed into 48 hours, jet lagged, emotional, and trying to make one of the biggest decisions of your life on almost no sleep. Or worse, you don't get to fly out at all. You're making the decision entirely off a website and a phone call. That is exactly why a local senior care advocate, someone who works for your family, not any one facility, can walk in those communities on your behalf, not instead of you when you can be there, but when you can't. A good advocate already has toured dozens of communities in the area. They know which ones talk a good game on the phone and don't deliver. They know which ones are quietly understaffed, and they know which ones will genuinely treat your mom like a person and not a room number. What a good advocate actually does during a tour, this isn't just walk through the lobby, smiling at the sales director. A real tour is done on your behalf and looks like this. Shows up unannounced or with minimal notice when possible. Just not for the scheduled stage walkthrough. Talks to actual caregivers and med techs on the floor, not just the marketing team, and ask how many residents there are for each responsible person on shift. Watches how staff speaks to the residents in the hallway. Do they crouch down and make eye contact or talk past them? Ask to see a sample care plan and understand exactly how care levels are assessed and priced. So there are no surprise fees 6 months in. Meal times look very different than mid-afternoon nap time, and points out questions about staff turnover, call light response times, and what happens on the night shift when someone falls. Takes photos and videos with permission so you can see the space yourself before you ever book a flight. Get straight answers on the state survey history and citation, information most families don't even know to ask for. In other words, an advocate does for you in person everything you would do yourself if you lived 5 minutes away. Whether you're touring yourself or reviewing an advocate's notes and video, here's exactly what to pay attention to. The smell test. Walk in and breathe. A heavy smell of urine covered by air freshener is a red flag for understaffing, not just a bad day. Staff to resident energy. Are caregivers rushing past residents, or do they pause, use name, make eye contact? Watch this in the hallway, not just in the room they walk into. Resident engagement. Are residents out of their room, in the dining room, in an activity, in the common areas, or are most of them alone behind the closed door mid-morning? The actual activity calendar, not the printed one on the wall. Ask what's actually happening this week and how many residents actually attend. Staffing ratios in writing. They should have a disclosure form to give you, but it's okay to ask. How many caregivers per resident on a day shift versus a night shift? Ask this directly and get the number, not a vague answer. The food. Ask to see today's actual meal, not a stock photo in a brochure. Ask if you can taste it. If you book it around lunchtime and they offer you lunch, that means they're super proud of their food and they want you to taste it. If you ask to taste the food and everybody looks at each other, red flag. Care plan process. How often is it reassessed? Who calls the family when something changes? And how fast? Safety and security. For memory care specifically, how are exits secured? And what's the elopement protocol if a resident wanders? Red flags to walk away from. Locked activity rooms with no explanation. Staff who can't tell you the name of the resident they're caring for. A sales director who won't give you the state survey report when asked, or any hesitation about letting you see a resident's room that isn't the model room. This is the exact list I use myself, and it's the list I hand everyone who is touring. All my advocates have a list that they need to look for on the family's behalf. It takes out the guesswork, the guilt of not being able to be there yourself, all out of the equation. I want to tell you about a family I worked with recently. I'll call her Carol. Carol's Aunt Margaret, 92, a stroke survivor, uses a wheelchair, living in an assisted living community in the Midwest. Carol lived in the Pacific Northwest near me. For years, a different family member held power of attorney. By the time Carol stepped in, she discovered financial exploitation had been happening. Money that should have gone toward her aunt's care had quietly disappeared. Carol did the hard thing. She took over POA, untangled those finances, and made a decision a lot of families are afraid to make. She decided to bring Margaret across the country to live near her. This wasn't simple. Margaret was fiercely independent in her wheelchair, deeply connected to her Catholic faith, and had a very specific things that made her feel like herself. Her baseball team on the TV, photos of birds on her wall, a good salad at dinner. Carol wanted all of that to come with her. Because Carol couldn't fly back and forth every week, I toured communities on her behalf, several assisted living options, and at her request, at least one adult family home. Because assisted living isn't the only option. And Carol hadn't even known that that alternative existed. I used the exact list I just walked you through. I talked to the caregivers on the floor, not just the sales team. I asked the staff about ratios and got real numbers, not vague reassurances. I watched how residents were treated in the hallway when no one was performing a tour. I took video so Carol could see the dining room, the activity room, and Margaret's would-be room herself from her kitchen table before she ever booked the flight. One community looked beautiful in photos, but couldn't give me a straight staffing ratio and got visibly uncomfortable when I asked to see a residence room outside the unit model. We crossed it off the list. The community we ultimately chose let me walk the halls unannounced, introduced me to caregivers by name, and had residents out of their room engaged mid-morning, not tucked away. From there, we built a phrase-by-phrase plan, confirming the community, coordinating the discharge with the Midwest facility, planning a 2-day trip with rest stops because, we don't rush 92-year-olds across the country, and making sure Margaret's room was set up with her photos, her team colors before she ever walked in or wheeled in through that door. Within the first week after move-in, Margaret was at meals using her new electric wheelchair on the slow setting. And on the very first night, there happened to be a ball game on TV. Carol said that was the moment she could finally exhale. Was it hard? Every phrase of it. But Carol didn't have to figure it out alone from 1,000 miles away. And she didn't have to gamble her aunt's safety on a glossy website. That's the point. Action steps. Identify one person who has real current eyes on your parent, a trusted staff member, a neighbor or social worker, and get their direct contact information before you're in crisis. Ask for read-only access to medical and financial accounts now. Waiting until something looks wrong is often too late. Have the honest conversation about relocation before it's ever an emergency. Could your parent be safer or more connected and better loved living closer to you? Learn a full range of options in the destination area, assisted living, memory care, adult family homes, before you assume you know which one fits. Bring in a local advocate who works for your family, not a facility, to be your boots on the ground during this transition, especially for touring. If an advocate tours on your behalf, ask for the specifics, staffing ratios in writing, video of the actual room and common areas, and a straight answer on state survey history. Never commit to a community or a trusted advocate who hasn't walked through in person. Photos and phone calls are not enough for a decision this important. Here's your weekly challenge. Step 1, identify one person on your parents' ground team today, a staff member, a neighbor, a social worker, and get their direct contact information. 2, write down 3 honest reasons and 3 against moving your parent closer to you. No judgment, just clarity. Step 3, if you're even considering a move for your parent, write down the 5 questions from today's episode that you want an advocate to ask on the tour. Staffing ratios, food, care plan process, safety protocols, and survey history. Step 4, share your truth publicly. Post it on Instagram and tag Clark County Senior Resources. Long distance caregiving is its own kind of exhaustion. Here's what I'm doing about it. This week's mantra, I don't have to be in the room to be in her corner. Distance doesn't measure my love. It just means I have to build the bridge on purpose. If this episode felt like it was speaking directly to you, it was. You don't have to figure this out alone. And here's the truth. You're not supposed to. Caregiving is not a solo journey, and trying to handle everything yourself is exactly what leads to burnout, resentment, and regret. So let me help you. If you're in crisis, hospital discharge, decline, dementia, confusion, book an urgent consultation with me, Shannon, at Clark County SR, or you can just shoot me a text or add yourself on my calendar. That's the easiest way to do it. If you need help with clarity, if you need someone to make a plan or take action without pressure or guilt, reach out. That's what I'm here for. I work with families, not corporations. My loyalty is to you, not facilities, not quotas, not anyone else's agenda. And please do these 3 things. Subscribe and rate this episode. Your review helps daughters who are drowning in overwhelm to find the relief they desperately need. Share this episode with another daughter, niece, or son who's managing care from far away and quietly carrying guilt about it. Let them know they're not alone. Do the challenge. Share your truth publicly. Tag Clark County Senior Resources on Instagram. Let's normalize the reality of caregiving, the hard, the messy, and the beautiful. And if today's episode hits close to home, if you're managing all this from far away and you feel like no one is around that gets you, you don't have to carry this alone in isolation. The Strong Daughters Club is where daughters just like you show up, even from other states. So distance is never a reason why you have to sit this one out. Come find the women who already understand exactly what you're carrying, because strong doesn't mean solo. Next week, we're tackling another tough caregiving reality that no one talks enough about. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for being here. And until then, be gentle with yourself.